Most business owners think doing a private equity deal means selling your company, walking away totally, and missing out on any future benefits of the company. And in this video, I'm going to break down how preparing for private equity investment does not mean that, and selling to private equity can actually look a lot better than you expected. The truth is, I've helped business owners secure 8-figure private equity offers without having to give up all of the control of their business. And in this video, I'm going to break down one of our favorite strategies to be able to make this happen. I'm going to talk about how it works, how you can get involved, and how to prepare your business for private equity investment for the maximum value and sell and achieve the exit that you truly want to achieve. But stick around, because later in this video, I'm going to reveal to you the number one mistake that most business owners make that causes them not to be able to do these kinds of deals and miss out on millions or maybe even tens of millions of dollars. And I'm going to reveal to you how you can avoid it and be ready to actually cash in on those opportunities. So I got a question for you to start out. Have you ever wondered what your business could be worth if the right investor stepped in and money wasn't really an issue? Maybe when you've thought of private equity, you've thought more of someone just buying the business, but you haven't really thought of them as an investor before. Another question is, who comes to mind when you think of some of the most successful entrepreneurs of today? Might be Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, maybe some other individuals. And the other question I would have for you is, how much of their companies do you actually think that they own still? The answer might surprise you. So Jeff Bezos actually owns only about 8.6% of Amazon, and Elon Musk only about 12% of Tesla. Most business owners think that selling means just owning everything till the very end and cashing out only one time. But these guys actually sold off parts of their company on the way up through their journey of growth so that they could bring the money and resources that were required to get them to the level that they wanted to get to. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how that strategy works and how it might be able to work for your business. So I want to ask you, are you the type of person that wants to hold all the control in your business and maybe have a small business, or would you rather just build a big business and do whatever it takes to get there? We're going to talk a little bit about what it actually takes to build a big business, a truly big business, maybe something that dominates a market nationally even. So here's the issue that we've noticed though. Many business owners assume that selling means walking away and losing out on future growth, but that's not necessarily the case. Others hesitate because they don't know what their business is worth, or they fear a long, complicated process if they try to sell. In other words, they just have fear of the unknown and they don't know how to solve the unknown. Without the right buyer and the right process, owners often get lowball offers, waste months in negotiations, or miss out on opportunities to scale before they sell their business. But the reality is, with the right structure and process, you can actually sell a portion of your business and then bring in capital and expertise, then even exit for more later, just like these guys that we talked about are doing. Now, these are the kinds of deals that we've helped business owners structure, which are deals where they've cashed out multiple times and grew their business significantly in between those multiple exits. In fact, recently we helped a business owner doing less than $4 million a year in revenue secure an 8-figure offer that allowed them to still hold on to part of the company and keep growing it for an even bigger exit in the future. Now, businesses that do this don't necessarily look the same. There are different things from one company doing $4 million a year to the other that actually allow it to be able to exit to private equity or with private equity and be able to get those massive exits. So two businesses doing $4 million a year do not necessarily look the same. And in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the differences and how you can prepare yours so that it stands out and is able to actually do these things. So in the rest of this video, I'm going to explain to you what the strategy is, why we do it, how it makes everyone money, how we're able to do it, what kinds of companies we can do it with, and even give an example of one of these deals from the beginning to the end that our team worked on. So in other words, I'm going to help you go from this guy who's operating his business, maybe already successful, but not really a giant business, not really a dream-making business. And you're going to go from that to this guy has had a massive exit. I'm going to talk about what the steps are along the way and how you get to the end goal here. But I especially want you to make sure that you don't miss the end, where I'm going to reveal, again, like I said, that number one mistake that most business owners make that stops them from being able to do this. So first, I have to explain what the strategy is. So this strategy is called a roll-up, a private equity roll-up. And I always explain roll-ups like this. I like to explain them like a cheeseburger. Now, if you were interested in having a cheeseburger, you would probably be willing to pay somewhere in the neighborhood of, let's say, maybe $15 to $20 for that cheeseburger. But I bet that you wouldn't pay $15 or $20 to buy all of the ingredients yourself individually and then go put them together into a cheeseburger. You'd probably be willing to pay maybe a couple dollars at most for all of these individual ingredients. So the buns, the cheese, the lettuce, tomato, and the burger, whatever else you want to put in it. But you're probably not going to want to pay $15 to $20 to have to do all of that yourself. So a private equity roll-up is really just at the core of it. It's doing the same thing, but with multiple businesses. So let's focus on the home services for a second. Maybe this, set of buns, maybe that's an HVAC company, and maybe the cheese is plumbing. Maybe the lettuce is electrical. And then maybe the tomato is something like landscaping, right? And the burger is something like just another larger HVAC business. So it's actually very valuable for someone to go and put all of these together, make them into a burger that someone might pay a lot more money for. And so private equity at the end of the day, when they do these roll-ups, all we're doing is we're making money through the organization of these resources, these companies, making them into one big company and selling that because there's a whole different type of buyer that will pay for this. So what this might actually look like in practice is maybe some of these buns, maybe these are worth 4 times multiple themselves. And then maybe all these other ingredients are each a 3x multiple. So you buy all those, but then you might actually get something like a 7 or an 8x multiple on this burger. So everyone that stayed on and kept part of their cheese or part of their bun or part of their tomato, part of their lettuce, part of their burger, everyone that kept part of that resource, that ingredient itself increased in value a whole lot just on the way from being a set of resources or a set of ingredients to an actual burger. And that's all a private equity roll-up is. So whenever you think of roll-ups, think of the cheeseburger, think of the value that you gain just by putting the ingredients together. And obviously it's on a larger scale, and we're going to talk a little bit about how that works. So at the end of the day, I describe it as this too. It's really combining multiple good businesses into one great business so that you can sell for a great price instead of a bunch of good prices. It's a team sport rather than an individual sport. So how are we able to do this when it would cost millions of dollars to buy these businesses? We do it with other people's money. So I've talked about private equity a lot. My company, Scale for Sale, takes advantage of our private equity relationships to be able to do these types of strategies. See, there's millions, tens of millions, in fact, billions and trillions of dollars sitting on the sidelines that came from individual investors or different organizations investing that are just waiting to invest in businesses like this, like yours. So in our case, we're investor-backed, capital heavy, and we're actively looking to acquire businesses that could get into this strategy. And we leverage our relationships with these private equity firms that have billions to hundreds of billions of assets under management and can immediately cut a check for the right business to start a strategy like this. They're looking to get into strategies like this all the time, and they just can't find these deals on their own enough to do enough of them to spend all the money that they have. It's kind of incredible, actually. So why would they do that? Again, it's because they know that if they bring all these ingredients together and pay one price for them, maybe an average of 4x multiple, they know that they can make it into a cheeseburger and sell that for maybe an 8, maybe even a 10x multiple, maybe even more. I've seen it for more. And we're going to talk about how that works. So what we do is we acquire businesses and invest in them to actually maximize the growth before the exit. So you as a business owner, you can sell a portion of your business, keep some equity, and cash out again a second time after we scale, which is often by acquiring other businesses and using many of the growth strategies that have worked for us before, over hundreds of businesses across every industry that you could imagine. Private equity is involved in a lot of things you would never expect. And that brings with it, working on all these different businesses and these different strategies, patterns start to emerge of how you grow businesses very quickly that most business owners don't know how to do on their own. So then we sell at a dramatically higher multiple later down the road to that cheeseburger buyer, someone who wants to buy a cheeseburger, because there's a whole different type of buyer for that juicy cheeseburger rather than just all the ingredients. And I'll tell you why. I'll let you in on a little secret. That next buyer that buys that cheeseburger is probably going to take that cheeseburger and put some truffle fries with it, and maybe some gourmet sauce, maybe a milkshake, and maybe even make a whole buffet out of multiple of those meals so that they can sell that buffet to a whole different type of buyer. And yes, if you're listening to this and this is making you feel incredibly poor, I feel the same way. Don't worry about it. There are people out there with way more money than you, than me. That's just the reality of it. But why not take advantage of it however we can? So there's people out there that want to take this cheeseburger, implement their own strategies, and make a whole buffet out of it. And we want to sell to the person that wants that cheeseburger. And then maybe eventually even sell to the person who wants the buffet. So usually we've actually already identified multiple of these end buyers before we even get started with one of these strategies. In other words, we know exactly who wants the cheeseburger, what kind of cheeseburger they want, what ingredients they want on it, and how much they're probably willing to pay for it given a certain set of circumstances, so that we can go out and get all the right ingredients together, juice them up the right way, put them under those commercial lights, make them look like they look on those commercials, and make them appeal to the right buyer. So we bring in top tier leadership, capital, and strategic growth systems to increase the business's value. That's how we do this. And if you have a business that you feel like might be ready for a strategy like this as you're listening to this, feel free to just go in the link of the description for this video and apply to do one of these deals with us. We can have a conversation about it. But I want to tell you a little bit about another deal that we worked on. So this is one that a member of my team worked on that actually went from 2020 to about 2022. And they started off by buying one HVAC business, went and did the strategies that I talked about, and completed 4 add-on acquisitions in the same area, the same geographical area. They broadened the services to include more services, so plumbing, more HVAC companies, kind of put them together, started cross-selling between the two, and put them on the same software and systems, and got them all integrated across, different practices and everything. And eventually we're able to sell it to that end buyer after making the cheeseburger that I talked about, and made it go from 1.9 million to 4.6 million in 23 months before selling it. So what did that mean? That meant that anyone who held on to that equity, the original business owner, it was actually now worth 6.7 times what it was worth before they got started. So if you had $100,000 of equity in this business remaining, it was now worth $670,000 of equity after it's sold because of these strategies. That's the kind of power that you can get from a strategy like this. And you can do it very quickly. It's not always 23 months, but you can sometimes do this very quickly. So what happened? They acquired the 4 businesses. They built a stronger team, scaled revenue and profitability through cross-selling and leadership. And it really wasn't that complicated. They brought in the right players to be able to make this strategy happen. So like I said, in 23 months, the company's EBITDA grew from 1.9 million to 4.6 million. When our team sold it again for around a 15x multiple, actually, the original owners were able to cash out again for a much larger amount because of the equity that they held onto and the control that they held onto in this company. So this netted them a far larger exit than if they had just sold it outright on day one. They got 2 exits, got all the cash flow that came in the meantime, and got to be a part of this massive thing, and probably boost their resumes to be able to go work on some pretty badass private equity deals afterwards if they wanted to. And this just guaranteed a better, smoother sale because it was in the hands now of someone with decades of mergers and acquisitions experience. So what kind of company can we actually do this with? There's a lot of things that have to be in place for the firms that we work with to be able to say yes to writing such a big check. So I told you earlier I was going to tell you the biggest mistake business owners make. The biggest mistake that they make when trying to get into these deals or preparing for these is not taking care of the 3 Ps of private equity preparation. Private equity firms are not idiots. They're sophisticated investors, and they did not get to where they're at on accident. They're very careful, and they look for very specific things. 3 things that you need to do first in your business. So the 3 Ps of private equity preparation are profits, positioning, and packaging. So let's talk about them a little bit. So as far as profits go, you have to have a certain amount of profit. Now this depends on the industry that you're in and the private equity firm that you're working with. We could certainly have a conversation about whether you're there if you talk with our team, but aside from that, there's some specifics you have to show too. You have to show the big 3 financials. This is your P&L, your balance sheet, and your cash flow statement. You absolutely have to be able to show these 3. You also, many people don't know this and don't expect this before they get into these deals, but you need to be able to typically show the last 2 years of profit and loss on a monthly basis, not just a yearly basis. So just your tax statements are not going to cut it. There's a whole bunch of other things you have to do that I cover in another video, but I'm not going to get too deep into it in this one. And you have to be able to show your books in accrual instead of cash-based accounting. You can look up what accrual means. It simply means recognizing your revenue as it's earned, not as it's collected. And you need to be able to segment your books into the actual streams of revenue. Very simple example is if you have a basic profit and loss statement that looks kind of like this: revenue, expenses, and then your profit on the bottom. You need to be able to show the individual segments of your revenue. So let's say that you're, again, an HVAC company like the one we talked about before, and you do some commercial work and some residential and some new construction work. So you need to break out your revenue into 3 different line items that are commercial, residential, and new construction. And you should be able to show the percentage of revenue that comes from each of them so that private equity firms, so that we can understand your business on a deeper level. And you should even break out your expenses on a little bit of a deeper basis too, and be able to show which departments are more profitable than others. So is commercial more profitable than residential or new construction? You should be able to see that from your profit and loss statements. Now, the next P is positioning. And simply 2 things that you should focus on here. You could get way more in depth than this, and I do in other videos, but you need to have either a GM or a CEO in place that is someone that's an operator, that's actually in charge of running the business day to day, where it can run day to day without you. This is going to add so much value to your business. Now, it is possible to do these deals without one of these, but that just means that it's going to reduce the value that you actually get on your first exit, and you're just not going to be able to sell for as much as you want to. So you need to put a GM or CEO in place before you actually get to this point to actually maximize your exit. You also should have standard operating procedures. You need to have the things that get done in your business documented, because it's a very feeble business if you don't. That means if you lose one key person one day, all of a sudden the bottom falls out, and the private equity firm that now owns your business, that invested all this money, isn't going to really know how to run it. So you need to have these things taken care of in the first place so that it's worth a lot more money. In other words, you need to go from this guy who's the business owner, who's just doing everything on his own, everyone reports to him, he's in charge of everything, he's the bottleneck or she's the bottleneck, to this guy or girl who's sitting on top of the organization and letting the people and systems run themselves. Now, packaging is the 3rd P. You need a SIM or a confidential information memorandum. And again, I have videos where I go way more in depth on that. You can hit the link in the description for my SIM school resource, as well as my add back template to be able to understand these businesses on a higher level. And then the last thing is you need a data room. You need to bring all of these resources together in one simple online structure where you can actually represent these things and show them to the right parties, and they can be able to look at your business in an organized or well-packaged way. The way that I describe this is many businesses are what I call napkin businesses. They're operating on a bunch of numbers on the back of a bunch of napkins. They're really disorganized, and these napkin businesses are really not worth very much money, because if an investor takes one look at them, it screams mess and disorganization. And they're just going to be worried that there's something that they could miss that represents them overpaying for the business. Now, compare that to a business that is a well-organized data system that is stored online, encrypted, and well taken care of and organized. This is really what they want to see. Now, the last part of packaging is that you need to have a growth plan for your business too. You can't just go do a private equity deal and have no idea how the business is going to be grown. Now, you're not going to be the only one that's responsible for growing the business, but you should at least have a plan both internally and externally of how it's going to work. So for internal growth, this is simply, just think of the question to yourself: what could absolutely blow up your business if money was unlimited, if it was out of the question, if there was just unlimited money? Because private equity, well, they don't have unlimited money. They do truly have a ridiculous amount that they could deploy on pulling the right levers to grow the business. So be thinking, what levers can you pull with that money? Now, for external growth, you want to be thinking, who could come in on this plan with you? This is the other businesses that are going to be part of this roll-up strategy with you. So you need to be forming something called an acquisition funnel. And it's very simple. It just looks like this. You want to be thinking about the different businesses that could complement your business, like the HVAC and plumbing companies complementing each other. So what services could you offer that you don't already? Or what services are you already offering where another company's offering the same ones, maybe commercial when you're residential or vice versa, or something like that, or maybe just more of what you're already doing that are in your area that could come into your funnel. And the first step of this is they need to be aware of you in the first place. Eventually, they're going to like you. If they're aware of you, they've got to eventually like you. And eventually, they need to trust you. And eventually, they need to be on the same page. So the more that you can work these businesses down this acquisition funnel, and the closer that they are to the bottom here to being able to be acquired as part of this strategy, the better. And the more leverage that you're going to have coming into this transaction, and probably more of the budget of the whole thing is going to be allocated towards your business. Okay, so let's talk for a minute about what private equity hates. We've kind of gone through what they like, but I think it's a lot more useful exercise to just think about what we actually don't like in a business so that you can go and start to do the opposite. We do not like when the owner is the operator because they're not going to have time to work on these growth strategies. We don't like cash-based books that are not segmented. We don't like a lack of standard operating procedures. We don't like no general manager or CEO in place. And we don't like a lack of an M&A pipeline or a mergers and acquisitions pipeline of other businesses that could be acquired. Now, ultimately, along this whole journey that we've described, you want to get to here. You want to get to this dream life that can only be brought by this massive exit that you're trying to have. But you're here somewhere. So there's all these things that need to happen along the way for you to get from here to here. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. So why am I telling you all this? Number one, I want to show you that this isn't theory. We've talked about a couple of these deals and how they actually played out. This is an actual proven model that has generated real life-changing results for business owners just like you. And number two, if you want to do this, I want to work on this stuff with you. I work on these types of deals every day, and I love doing this. So if you've ever thought about getting this kind of investment or selling, or if you just feel like the business is ready for that next stage of growth, even if it's just in the back of your mind right now, let's talk. So at Scale for Sale, we work on these. We handle your profits, positioning, and packaging wherever you're at in the journey so that you can get pre-qualified by the best firm for you specifically so that we can then together work through the process of the roll-up and so that the process is smooth and risk-free for you. So we get you from here to here through those 3 Ps. Now, we can walk you through what a deal might look like for you personally, whether now or in the future. But the reality is most businesses just aren't ready for this kind of thing. This meeting is really just to see if this would even make sense for your business. So if you think this could be a beneficial thing for you to know, just go to the link in the description, book a meeting with my team of professionals so that you can find out how much of the 3 Ps you've already done and what it would look like for you to do the rest of them so that we could blow up your business with private equity and so that you can achieve that life-changing exit that you've always dreamed of. And if you still want to know more, I made this video that goes way more in depth on the 3 Ps and how you can actually do these. It's a little more targeted towards home services businesses, but pretty much everything still applies to all industries. So you can go ahead and watch it up here.